早上好，你好吗？我很好，为这一天感谢上帝，谢谢你的支持，我爱你们，我希望你一直要都好。我会说英语。I would like to speak to my viewers about the salt addiction and tie it into the other two serious food addictions, which are caffeine and sugar, because I haven't really discussed salt and it works in a different way. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But first, I would like to have a discussion about business. Again, this doesn't really matter where you live. I still feel like you will be able to agree with the perspective. 谢谢你的时间. Thanks for your time. If you own a small business, well, you're responsible enough to own a business. And people that own businesses are financially responsible enough to own a business, and that allows other people that either don't have the skill or interest to own a business, to have a job, to be able to supply a living for themselves. If you are a business owner, you are financially mature, you had to be to get in that position. And if something breaks, well, it is 110% on the business owner to correct it. And that's not really disputable. You own the business, it's broken, you correct it. And that is the case in business in general. Now, I mention a small business because there's a real need for sensitivity to the needs of the small businesses at this time. We all know why, and I don't even have to elaborate, but it is a serious issue. We're losing our small businesses, and families are suffering because the numerical governing is not being corrected, even though all of these very financially stable and mature people paid for protection from this happening. It's still happening. That's a fraudulent deal on these financially responsible people's earnings. That's not my rule. And I don't even own a small business. It's a serious issue. But you can apply it to any business. And I would like to display how corporate bullying is even affecting some of the bigger corps. And this is serious too. Now, I do live in extreme poverty, so it's hard for me to have sympathy for their situation. But the truth is, it's still the situation, because it really doesn't matter how many zeros you have right now. You're being numerically bullied. So some like big corporate food chains and coffee chains, right? Well, now they're not open from 8 to 12. Well, that's 4 hours they're losing business. And they're only allowed drive-in with no walk-in between 5 and 8. Well, that's service and business that they're losing because people can't walk in. That's not their decision. That's decisions coming down on them. And that guarantees that even the big corps are not making as much money as they should be and need to. Now, like I said, it's hard for me to have sympathy for it, but it is a serious situation because those business owners are really big business owners. And in my stance, I would still consider them kind of like a corporate bully. And you know what? Those corporate bullies are being bullied by the people above that, because a lot of these places should just be open, and they're not, because of decisions from people that don't want those places making more money. The bullying is right across the board, and it's very serious. And now, to tie it back to what I was saying about if you own a business and something breaks, you know it's on you to fix it. You don't look to your customers and say, my fridge is broke, come fix it. And if you had a terrible week financially and that fridge is broke, you still got to fix it. It's not on anybody else to fix those things in your business. And if you're a big corp, it's the same thing. Now, obviously, big corps don't have problems with that as much because they have the fundages to do so, but these small businesses do not. And that is a serious concern. With no compassion, it's a serious concern. But like I said, to tie it back in, I want to talk about the fact that we understand, let's say, V-Bucks. V-Bucks is an online currency in a game. Children use real cash and transfer it onto a card. Now, obviously, you're not getting something serious like your bills paid. You're getting things in a game. And so, because of that, the exchange rate from your cash to V-Bucks is fantastic. You put like $50 in, you get 50,000, right? And that makes sense because they're not selling you something really important. But it is still a currency exchange in that that child takes cash, puts it into a bank, sends that cash, which isn't cash anymore, to the V-Bucks company, gets credit on that card, and can use it to buy the newest rock character in Fortnite. But to that child, that is still something they want. They're getting something they want by taking cash, putting it in the bank, sending it to V-Bucks, and using that currency, which is obviously a great exchange rate due to the circumstance. And from my stance, there isn't really a big difference in taking your cash and putting it in the bank and putting it on your bank card than taking your cash, putting it in the bank machine and putting it on V-Bucks. Because logically and simply, you're taking cash, putting it in a bank machine, transferring it to a card, and then using it to buy something. And the exchange rate to V-Bucks has to be extraordinary because of the circumstances. However, the exchange rate from our cash to our bank card that's buying our food is extremely dangerous at a time where financial late fees on guaranteed financial inadequacies are sucking our cash right up. That's our practical protection. It's getting removed. And the exchange rate is awful. And this isn't a fucking game. This isn't a new character in a video game. This is feeding our children and running our businesses. And it's not worth our time. In the exact same way, our small businesses are not worth their time. Well, working for these individuals has not been worth our time. And now we're in worse financial state than we've been since 1971, and we have no reason to believe it's going to change. And we, as responsible human beings, need to take this seriously as a global threat, because it is. Additionally, the same people are running our food industry. Our health is at an all-time low. We're in a pandemic. They're not protecting our cash. They're sucking it up. And they're giving us terrible exchange rates and financially penalizing us for their guaranteed financial inadequacies. And they're not protecting our health because the degree of caffeine, salt, and sugar that's normal, made to be normal to the norm, is completely abusive. The foods that we know are fucking with our hormones and everything like that and making us obese, they're all perfectly all right by the FDA. And there has to be some garbage products, but the degree at which those levels are set are so far out of hand, and so many people are addicted and don't even know, and the FDA is not going to change that. Those foods are all going to remain, and that's just the way it is. And this is very frustrating to me because our healthcare workers are overworked the fuck because our health is fucked, because our food is fucked, now our finances are fucked, and it all goes back to the same guidance from the same individuals. And it is not a fucking game. It is our children. It is our organization of our world. And it is our civilization. And you are not going to be able to change my mind on any of the things I just said. Because it's true. And since I have developed such a strong nature-based food consumption, and I have myself removed all food addictions related to the abusive degrees of salt, sugar, and caffeine allowed, I have a great degree of clarity, and I can see it plain as day. And due to the fact that my studies are in food and human body, I can help, even if you can't. And I want to, and I'm trying to. But ultimately, these products are still going to be on the market, and you yourself have to make the right choice. Conscious choice. It goes into your food too. And with all seriousness, because I know I'm saying a lot of very serious things, but I'm very, very honest in what I'm saying. You don't have to agree with me, but respectfully, if you don't, I feel like you're not seeing it. Respectfully. You can think I'm wrong, and I can agree with you peacefully, and disagree with you peacefully, I mean. The bad food products are like this. The good food products are like this, right? And this big gap right here, this gap represents all the shit food. And this little bit down here is the good food. And we pay and assume the FDA is protecting us from our market being flooded with shit products. And the FDA has not protected us from filling our market with shit product. In the same way, the government is not going to correct the financial offset but make it worse, because it's the same fucking issue. Thank you for accepting that maturely. I know sometimes I get strong on my opinions, but this is very serious to me. It's our children, it's our finance, it's our civilization. I'm going to talk to you about salt. This is how salt is damaging the people modernly due to decisions made in our food products. We know that too much salt is not good for the body, but you should know that salt itself is not bad for your body. Salt itself is a natural substance, and you can consume it responsibly. It can do good things for you. However, the way the salt addiction works is it's the level of salt that's in your body. It's not that salt itself is in your body. It's the degree of salt that's in your body. And what you think is a safe and average degree of salt to have in your body has been very much so normalized by the FDA's decisions of the products. And you know what's going on there based on the heated message I had prior to remaining calm and talk to you about this, because I am really trying to help. So it's the degree of salt that's in your bloodstream that causes the issue, not the fact that salt itself is there. So this is how it's harming us. You think the degree of salt is okay, and it's not. So you don't think it's a big deal as you consume it, but it is. And the reason it's almost like an addiction is that once you take, say, a really salty chip, I'm going to talk about this in form of chips, but you can actually apply it to any product, which is a lot of them, that has way too much salt in it on the market. But I'm going to talk about it in reference to chips. If you take a potato chip that has full salt on it, just the way it's made normally. Now, I'm not saying it's extra. It's just the way you're used to eating, say, a normal Lay's chip or something, right? That degree of salt is too much salt. That product is very much so normalized, and we know it's too much salt. And to confirm that, the same companies have recently come out with low sodium options because they admit that those products have too much salt. But you still have the choice to choose that. So you set the marker to how much salt is needed to be pleasurable or satisfying to your palate of your mouth. Due to the way I live, I haven't added salt or have salt in anything. If it's already in it, I'll eat it, but if it's heavily salted, I won't. And I have retrained my palate to a healthier degree of salt in my mouth that's still satisfying. So when I do eat the full salt chip, it's offensive to my palate because I've worked the degree of expectation down. And that is very much so a matter of training your mouth. And a lot of the conscious eating involves training your mouth to a more healthy degree of expectation for pleasure while you maintain your health. So in that, if you are used to plowing the salt in, you need more salt to be satisfied. That's how the addiction works, because it is so mouth to brain. The salt triggers the brain. How much salt triggers the brain? Well, it's up to you. So if you take an unhealthy amount of salt and you need that to trigger your brain, well, when you give it less, it doesn't really trigger your brain. So you could see how that would lead people towards eating a dangerous amount of salt for their health, because they are tasty and it does trigger that kind of flavor expectation for the individual. But again, low sodium options are available, which is great. However, in all seriousness, if the FDA was interested in correcting some of these things in reference to salt, we know we have low sodium chips. And people generally know, a lot of people buy them, some people don't. But in creating the low sodium chips, they are acknowledging that the original brand has too much salt. Otherwise, they wouldn't even bother making the low sodium chip because they wouldn't even acknowledge that it had too much. So they know it does. So a very practical, simple correction could be take the low sodium chip and just make that the norm. And the one that we know has too much, wean it out. Make way more low sodium than regular, but don't label them as low sodium and regular. Label the low sodium as regular and label the regular ones as extra salt, because that's what it is. The low sodium ones are actually just normal. They are a little salty, but it's a healthier degree of salt, and that's okay, because you don't have to avoid salt, because again, salt isn't necessarily bad for you, it's the degree of salt. So the low sodium ones are good, but just make them normal and don't label them as low sodium, just make them normal. That will set the norm. And then the other one that is more salty that people might still want, it's still not healthy for them. So we don't really want to encourage them to eat it. So to properly label it, you can still put it on the market, but label it properly as high sodium. If you still want a low sodium option, seeing as where the old low sodium is now made the norm, you can actually decrease the salt again, still have some salt, but less than the less salt, and make that the less salt option. So what you end up with is, we're not going to put no salt on them. You can have very little salt and call that the low sodium. what we call low sodium now becomes the norm to properly guide people towards proper levels of salt. And the one that they put on the market that's supposed to be normal is not normal, so label it properly as high sodium. And in that, all the options are available, but the people are pushed towards the low sodium ones because it's better for their health. The other ones are still available, and if you want to choose those ones, you can, but you will know, and you'll have a heightened awareness to the fact that it may be damaging your health due to the salt degree. That is a very reasonable, practical, and humane decision with salt in reference to the degrees that we as humans think are all right, because in the current circumstance, the products that are out are not properly labeled. People's expectation of salt in their mouth is through the roof, and it's affecting their blood in really dangerous ways. And I feel like we should take it more seriously, especially given the fact that we're amongst a pandemic, but anytime. So again, I don't expect the FDA to do that. In fact, I don't expect anybody to give a fuck about any of this. But again, I expect this degree of health for others, all others, because I have upheld that degree of health for myself. And whether if you think that's a difficult thing to do or not, doesn't really matter. You can also see how it would make me this way and clear my mind. And I don't feel like I'm being overly disrespectful in what I'm saying, but I feel like the human body is being disrespected in the decisions, respectfully. And you could see how, since the salt addiction is more about your own personal degree of expectation, you can see how it works differently than the caffeine and sugar addiction. Because the caffeine and sugar addiction, when it leaves your body, it creates irritation. The food addiction will make you feel like eating when you don't have to and make you irritable, right? And then the caffeine addiction, when it leaves, it gives you headaches and it makes you feel irritable. If you have an eating addiction and you eat when you're not hungry, well, you're feeding the addiction. And if you have a caffeine addiction and you pump way more caffeine in instead of pushing through your caffeine headache because you already have been taking in too much, well, you're still feeding that caffeine addiction. So you can see how they work differently, but they're still very serious. And all three of them have degrees of levels that are made to be normal based on the products that are available. And the products that are available are not protecting us. So I'm trying to. Thank you very much for your interest in your own true health. Being honest to yourself about your own degree of health is crucial to your own degree of health. If you lie to yourself about it, it prevents you from improving it, and lying to yourself is damaging to your own mental health. So I really encourage you to take it seriously. Thank you for your time and consideration. In reference to the caffeine, I know if you watched my caffeine video, and if you did, thank you very much for taking these perspectives seriously. I discussed about how I use caffeine, where I have a good sized cup in the morning, and then I don't drink it all day, but I'll have a good coffee in the evening to kind of get me over the hump of the energy I need for the end of the evening. Then I'm not adding calories, I'm still getting the energy, and when the caffeine crash comes, it's time for bed. Well, in that way, I use caffeine in a healthy way rather than depending on it to keep me fueled all day. But I wanted to give a quick example of the size portion that I drink. Now in the morning, my coffee is this big. And then in the evening, when I want to have another one, my coffee is this big. So this is the amount of coffee I drink in a day. This is my morning. This is a good sized cup. This is my evening. It's roughly about half. But if I drink all of that in the evening, it's enough to get me through. And additionally, I love coffee. I used to drink like 8 cups a day. So I don't really like avoiding it. I want to drink it a lot because I love it. But I'm being responsible for my health by doing this. And when I do have the one in the evening, it's generally more enjoyable because I've been waiting to have it. So I know that makes sense to you, and I hope you could take food addiction seriously for the sake of yourself and for the sake of future generations, because, well, quite simply, the FDA is not going to. So we have to make the right choices for ourselves and for our children. Today, I have to go for a walk to town. I have to do some things. 我不想，我知道，我必须这样做。我会 but I will have an opportunity to see my children today. 为我们的孩子感谢上帝. So I'm going to be busy throughout most of the day today. So I won't be able to come back around with another video before meditation like I have been the last couple of days due to the circumstance. But I am expecting to be alone later tonight. And at that time, I plan on doing some more studio work and sharing some more messages with my viewers while I have my studio. 感谢你对我以上的工作感兴趣。再次欢迎你。Thank you for your interest in my life's work. In the meantime, eat well, remain optimistic, and create a great day for yourself. 对所有人的和平与爱，再次感谢上帝。我爱你们。再见。